Hi, and welcome to another 5 Minutes with Mark. We're going to continue in chapter 8, verses 22 to 30. They came to Bethsaida. Some people brought a blind man to Jesus and begged him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had put saliva in his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked, "Can you see anything?" And man looked up and said, "I can see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he looked intently, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything. Then he sent him away to his home, saying, "Do not even go into the village." Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. So there's kind of two stories, but these stories are interwoven, and they kind of rely on each other. The first is the story of the healing of the blind man. And just like a little bit earlier, when Jesus healed the deaf mute, he uses saliva and he takes this person away from the crowds. This blind man is unnamed, so we don't know who he is. We just know that the crowds have brought him to Jesus, believing that Jesus can heal him. And what's very interesting about this story of the healing of the blind man, there's two things. The first is that it doesn't take. Jesus has to make a second attempt to fully restore his sight. Now, there might be some deep meaning behind that about seeing with your heart and then your eyes or something like that. I don't know. It's unusual also in that it's one of the stories that's not in any of the other gospels. And maybe they just left it out because that whole thing was too problematic. And again, Jesus tells this man to say nothing to anyone and go home. And we don't know how he responds. So in the last couple of chapters, we've had the deaf man healed who could not stop talking about Jesus. We've had the blind man gaining his sight. And yet the disciples are both blind and deaf to who Jesus is. And so then as they're on their way to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, he asks people, who do people say that I am? It's a big generic. Who do people say that I am? And they repeat what they repeat in the other gospels: John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. And so we go back again to that idea of Jesus continuing in the line of the prophets. And Elijah is a real possibility because we never see Elijah die. He leaves the earth in a chariot of fire and kind of sails off into the sunset. So there were some who believed Elijah might still be alive. And then he asks the disciples directly, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone. Now, that sternly ordering is the same Greek root, as when Jesus rebukes the demons and tells them to say nothing. So he is giving his disciples the same command that he gives the demons, who seem to know who he is. But what's really unusual about this is that the proclamation from Peter that Jesus is the Messiah is a proclamation that he is the king that is to come. He's the one who's come to lead Israel. He's the promised Messiah. And as I was reading, people don't know if Peter was foreshadowing, if this was a fluke. The two things that really strike me about Peter's proclamation is, one, Jesus has done nothing to this point to show that he's a kingly leader. And the second one is in both Matthew and in Luke, when Peter proclaims Jesus' messiahship, he ties it to the Son of God or the chosen one of God, or somehow brings God into it. He doesn't do that here. But this is going to be a turning point in the Gospel of Mark. Thanks, and we'll join you another time.